The morning sun shone through the lace curtains Gwendolyn had hung back in the 80s. Every morning when I looked at them, I remembered her hands, her slender fingers fiddling with the hook and thread. She liked to knit at dawn when the house was still asleep. She said that in the silence the most beautiful patterns were born. 5 years since she's been gone, and I still can't bring myself to change those curtains. Why should I? They still let in just the right amount of light, not too bright, not too dim. Just like everything Gwen did. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet. The house on Pine Street had aged with us too. It was over 50 years old. We'd bought it right after I'd been appointed chief hydrologic engineer for the Kalispell City water system. Big loan, monthly payments for 25 years. But we did it. This house is our family history, written in every crack in the ceiling, every creaking step. I made my way to the kitchen, mechanically poured coffee into the old coffee maker and pulled out my pills. A small morning army of colorful soldiers lined up on the table for blood pressure, for cholesterol, vitamins. I was once a strong man, able to design and supervise the construction of an entire dam. Now my main task is to remember to take my medication. 83 is a strange age. You still remember yourself as young, strong, full of plans, but your body reminds you with every movement that those times are long gone. After Gwen died, it was as if the house had gotten even bigger. Too much space for one old man. The doorbell rang as I was finishing my breakfast. On the doorstep stood Thatcher, my grandson, Merritt's son. Tall, lean, with my eyes and Gwendolyn's smile. "Good morning, Grandpa." He hugged me, not too tightly, as if he was afraid of breaking me. "I brought new seedlings for the back flower bed, as promised." Thatcher worked as a landscaper and, unlike his mother, he didn't visit me only on holidays. Usually, once a week, he would come over to help with the garden, which was becoming an increasingly overwhelming task for me. "You should have come in for coffee first," I grumbled as I let him in. "What's the hurry?" "I'm sorry, Grandpa," he smiled, taking off his jacket. "I just want to get there before the heat. Do you know how hard it is to plant when the sun is baking your back?" We had coffee in the kitchen, and Thatcher talked about his latest projects. He'd recently been commissioned to design the grounds of the city's new library. I listened, looking out the window at the garden that Gwendolyn and I started planting almost half a century ago. "I'll go start on the south side," Thatcher said, finishing his coffee. "And you rest, Grandpa. I'll manage." I nodded, but of course I wasn't going to just sit in the house. I put on an old work shirt and went out into the garden, where Thatcher was already digging holes for the new plants. "What are we planting?" I asked, carefully lowering myself onto the garden bench beside him. "Hydrangeas and a few varieties of hostas," he replied, still working. "They're unpretentious and shade-loving, perfect for this corner of the garden." I looked at his hands, confidently working the soil. He was like Gwendolyn in that. The same love of plants, the same patience. "Grandmother would have loved it," I remarked. Thatcher smiled without raising his head. "I remember how she taught me to distinguish weeds from seedlings. She said that gardening was all about attention to detail." We worked for several hours, or rather, Thatcher worked, and I handed tools and sometimes gave advice, which he listened politely, although I'm sure he knew much more about gardening than I did. At noon, as the sun rose high, my daughter Merritt's silver Lexus stopped in the driveway. She got out of the car, elegant and trim as ever. At 54, she looked much more after herself than her mother ever had. "Daddy, Thatcher," she waved to us as she closed the car. "What a surprise. I didn't know you were here today, son." Thatcher threw a quick glance at me. We both knew it wasn't true. He'd told her his plans on the phone yesterday. "Hey, Mom." He straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Decided to help Grandpa with the garden. Merritt stepped closer, treading carefully on the path in her high heels. Daddy, are you working in the garden again? Dr. Pembroke said, you need to take care of yourself. I sighed. Merritt always started the conversation with remarks about my health. I'm just sitting here watching my grandson work, I replied. It's not illegal yet, as far as I know. She pursed her lips, but decided not to pursue the subject. I brought you lunch from that Italian place you like, she said, pointing to the bag in her hand. And I wanted to see how you were doing on your own. We moved into the house. As Merritt laid out the food on the kitchen table, I watched her. Something in her movements betrayed tension. She never just showed up, especially with a meal from a restaurant 30 miles away. Thatcher washed his hands and joined us. Merritt arranged the plates, pulled a lemonade out of the refrigerator. So, Dad, she began as we began to eat, I've been thinking about your house. Here it is. I put my fork down. And what were you thinking about my house? She took a sip of lemonade, choosing her words. It's too big for you alone. So many rooms empty and you can barely keep up with the upkeep. Maybe you should consider something a little more compact? Thatcher tensed, but continued to eat in silence. This house was compact enough when 4 people lived here, I answered calmly. It seems big now because I'm alone. But it's mine and I'm not going anywhere. Merritt pretended to be surprised by my reaction. Dad, I'm just worried about you. This house needs constant maintenance. The roof, the garden, the heating in the winter, and you're already 83. Maybe you should think about the future. The future? I chuckled. At my age, the future is a very relative concept. That's exactly why, she said. Wouldn't it be better to plan ahead? Barkley and I have a great idea. Mom, Thatcher interrupted her. Grandpa's doing a great job. I help with the garden. Mrs. Coleridge from next door comes twice a week to clean up. Everything's under control. Merritt threw her son a disapproving look. Of course, sweetheart, but that's now. What about a year from now? 2? She turned to me. Papa, thee realize I'm only thinking of your welfare. Barkley and I could— Thank you for lunch, Merritt. I rose from the table. But it's time for me to take my medicine and get some rest. Dr. Pembroke, as you remember, advised me to take care of myself. She pursed her lips, but didn't insist. After lunch, Thatcher went back to the garden to finish his work, but Merritt, to my surprise, stayed behind. Papa, the door's open, she asked. It's been a long time since I've been in some of the rooms. I shrugged. Look if you want to. Nothing had changed. While she walked around the house, I sat in my chair in the living room, pretending to read the newspaper. In reality, I was listening to her footsteps. She looked in every room, even went up into the attic. What was she looking for? Or was she evaluating? When she came back, she sat down across from me. Daddy, I've been meaning to ask you a long time. Do you have a will? That's it. I looked at her and saw not my daughter, but the pragmatic tax consultant she had become. I do, I answered briefly. I made it when your mother was alive. Updated it after she died. Can I ask? No, I folded the paper. No, you can't. It's my business. She looked hurt. Dad, I just want to be ready, so there won't be any problems later, you know? Barkley says, I'm not interested in what your husband says, I said. When the time comes, you'll know everything. Until then, this is my life and my property. Merritt stood up, adjusting her perfectly fitting jacket. Okay, Dad, whatever you say. I just wanted to help. She left shortly afterward, citing an important client meeting. Thatcher stayed until evening, finished the flower bed, and helped me make dinner. Grandpa, don't mind Mom, he said, as we sat on the veranda with tea. She's just— Well, you know what she's like? I knew. Merritt was always practical to the point of callousness. Maybe it's my fault, Gwendolyn, and I spoiled our only daughter too much. Or maybe she was born that way. Either way, her interest in my house was all too obvious. The next morning, I felt sick. When I woke up, I felt like I couldn't take a full breath. My chest felt like it was in a vice. I struggled to get to the phone and call Dr. Pembroke. They kept me in the hospital for 3 days. Tests, x-rays, some new tests. On the last day, Pembroke came in with a serious face. "Ebner," he said, closing the door. "I have some bad news." I nodded. "When you're 83, you don't expect good news from the doctors." "Pulmonary emphysema," he said. "It's pretty advanced. I'm surprised you haven't had symptoms before." "I had symptoms," I admitted. "I just thought it was age." Pembroke shook his head. "Age is not a disease, Ebner. I'll give you treatment, but be prepared for it to get progressively worse. You will need help." He wrote out the prescriptions, explained the medication regimen, and added, "And I'm sending a nurse to you, twice a week for injections and checkups. Her name is Fiona Campbell, very experienced. Thatcher drove me home. He offered to stay the night, but I declined. I needed to be alone, to process what I'd heard." Fiona showed up the next day, a short woman in her 50s with short red hair and freckles on her face. "Minus Mr. Dorset," she held out her hand to shake. "I'm Fiona Campbell. Dr. Pembroke sent me to help with your treatment." She wasn't the chatty type, which suited me fine. Quickly and professionally administered the injection, checked your blood pressure, wrote the readings in a notebook. "Do you live alone?" she asked as she packed up her instruments. "Yes," I answered. "My wife died 5 years ago. Children, a daughter, and a grandson, but they live apart." She nodded. "It's good that you have a family. With your diagnosis, support from loved ones is very important." I didn't bother to tell her that my daughter was more interested in my home than in my health. Fiona came twice a week on Tuesdays and Fridays. Gradually, we began to talk about more than just my health. She turned out to be a widow, like me. Her husband had died in a car accident 10 years before. They had no children. One day, while Fiona was giving me an injection, Merritt came in unexpectedly. She came in without knocking, with the key I'd given her years ago for emergencies. "Daddy?" She froze in the doorway when she saw Fiona with the syringe. "What's going on?" Fiona nonchalantly finished the procedure. "Hello, you must be Mr. Dorset's daughter," she said. "I'm Fiona Campbell, nurse. Dr. Pembroke sent me to help your father." Merritt shifted her gaze to me. "Dad, why didn't you tell me you needed a nurse? What's wrong?" I didn't want to tell her about the diagnosis. I didn't want to see the fake concern on her face hiding the calculation. "It's nothing," I replied. "It's just age. Dr. Pembroke is being reassuring." Fiona gave me a surprised look, but didn't say anything. Merritt didn't believe me. "You don't just send a nurse. What's wrong with you?" "Minus Mr. Dorset is being treated for pulmonary emphysema," Fiona said as she gathered her things. "The injections have to be given regularly, and some of the treatments are difficult to do on your own." I saw the look on Merritt's face. First shock, then something else. A fleeting expression I couldn't or wouldn't recognize. "Emphysema?" She sat down next to me. "Dad, why did you hide it?" "It's serious." "That's exactly why I was hiding it," I replied. "I didn't want to bother you." Fiona said goodbye tactfully and left. As soon as the door closed behind her, Merritt leaned toward me. "How serious is it?" "What does the doctor say?" I shrugged. "The usual. That at my age you have to be prepared for anything." "Daddy," she took my hand, a gesture that felt unnatural. "You can't live alone with this diagnosis. You need constant care, supervision." "I have Fiona," I released her hand. "And I'm doing a great job. But she only comes twice a week. What if something happens while she's away?" Merritt shook her head. "No, that won't do. Barkley and I were just talking." "About what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer, about whether you should move in with us, or, she paused, maybe there's another option. We could move in here. It's a big house, plenty of room for everyone, and it would be easier for Barkley to get to work from here. That's it. I looked at my daughter and didn't recognize her, or maybe it was the other way around, finally seeing the real her. Merritt, I said slowly. I'm not moving in, and no one's moving in with me. This is my home, and I'm going to live in it as long as I can. But Dad, thank you for your concern. If I need help, I'll come to you. In the meantime, I'm doing fine. She left, clearly displeased, but she didn't insist, at least not that day. Later, lying in bed, I thought about the look on her face when she heard about my diagnosis. It wasn't grief or fear for me. It was something else, something akin to calculation. I knew this was just the beginning. Now that she knew I was sick, the talk of home would become more insistent, and I had to be ready. After Merritt's visit and Fiona's accidental disclosure of my diagnosis, I began to notice a change. My daughter started showing up much more often, first once a week, then twice. Always with some excuse, a homemade cake to bring, a new plaid for the living room, or just passing through and thought I'd drop in. 30 miles from her home, she was passing through. Funny, she didn't arrive alone that Tuesday. A silver Lexus pulled up in front of my house around 4 in the afternoon, just after Fiona left. Merritt and her husband Barkley, a tall, trim man with impeccably styled graying hair and a smile that never reached his eyes, got out of the car. Daddy, Merritt waved her hand as if we hadn't seen each other in years. Look who I brought. Barkley headed toward the porch, holding a folder of some kind. It alerted me at once. In the 20 years that they have been married, he visited my house only on major holidays, and he'd never come with work documents. Ebner, he held out his hand for a handshake. How are you feeling? Merritt told me about your diagnosis. I'm sorry. His tone was perfectly calibrated, just the right amount of sincerity for decency. No more, no less. It's fine, I said, letting them in. What brings you to my neighborhood, Barkley? As I recall, you're not much of a country traveler. He smiled his lawyer's smile. Sometimes it's good to get a change of scenery. Besides, Merritt and I have something important to discuss with you. We went into the living room. Merritt went straight to the kitchen, saying she would make tea, and Barkley and I were left alone. He was looking around the room with undisguised interest. It's a beautiful house, he remarked. How many square feet are there? About 2,000, I answered. Plus the attic and basement. He whistled. That's a lot for one person. A lot for one person, a lot for a family, I countered. When we built it, we didn't think we'd have to live here alone. Barkley nodded with feigned sympathy. Of course, of course. When you lose your life partner, everything changes. Merritt returned with a tray. She poured the tea, served the cookies. All her movements were feignedly caring. Now, Barkley began, pulling some papers out of a folder. Merritt and I have been thinking a lot about your situation, Ebner. What situation? Your health? Your living arrangements? Your future? He spread the papers out on the table. We have a proposal that will solve all your problems at once. I waited silently for him to continue. Merritt fixed her hair nervously. Daddy, we think you should transfer the house to Barkley. Just formally, she added hastily, seeing the look on my face. You'll still live here, of course, but it'll save you from property taxes, the hassle of maintaining the house. And it will give you the right to dispose of my property, I finished for her. Barkley cleared his throat. Ebner, this is standard practice for inheritance planning. We just want to avoid inheritance problems when… He hesitated, choosing his words. When the time comes. Taxes, bureaucracy, estate appraisals. All of that can drag on for months, if not years. I looked at the papers he'd laid out. The deed of gift. Already filled out, only my signature was missing. What's the rush? I asked, putting the papers aside. I'm not going to die yet, you know. Merritt cast a quick glance at her husband, then turned to me. Dad, no one's talking about dying. On the contrary, we want you to live a peaceful life without worrying about household problems. With my diagnosis, I can live another 10 years, I interrupted. Dr. Pembroke said that with proper treatment, emphysema is not a death sentence. Of course, Barkley agreed hastily, but it's never too early to plan for the future. Besides, he lowered his voice, as if sharing a secret. Real estate is rapidly increasing in value in our county. If you make the transfer now, you can avoid significant tax payments in the future. I leaned back in my chair, looking at my daughter and her husband. Did they really think I was that naive? Or had they just gotten desperate and decided to go head on? Thank you for your concern, I said finally. But I'm not ready for such serious decisions yet. I need to think it over. Merritt looked disappointed, but Barkley remained professionally calm. Of course, Ebner, there's no rush. I'll leave the papers for you to study at your leisure. He folded them neatly and handed them to me. And if you have any questions, call me any time. After they left, I sat in the chair for a long time, going through the documents left behind. A gift deed, a power of attorney to manage the property, some other legal papers. Barkley had thought of everything. If I signed these papers, and my house would actually cease to be mine. The next day, when Fiona came to give me my injection, I was still lost in thought. Is something the matter, Mr. Dorset? She asked, noticing my absent-mindedness. You're not yourself today. My daughter and son-in-law want me to sign the house over to them. Fiona paused for a moment, then continued preparing the injection. What have you decided? Nothing yet, but they're persistent. She administered the injection and sat down across from me. Minus Mr. Dorset, I've been working with the elderly for 20 years, and I've often seen relatives take a keen interest in the property, especially when they learn of serious diagnoses. I nodded. Yes, it was after Merritt found out about my emphysema that those conversations started. Be careful, Fiona lowered her voice. I don't mean to speak ill of your family, but I've seen a lot of cases where older people have been rushed into these decisions. Thank you for the warning, I smiled at her. But don't worry, I'm still in my right mind and I'm not going to sign anything I don't agree with. After Fiona left, I called my old friend Phineas, who was a notary, and, though semi-retired, still consulted for some clients. I told him about Barkley's visit and the documents shown. Ebner, don't sign anything, Phineas said firmly. Especially the deed of gift. It is the most unfavorable option for you to transfer the property. There's no guarantee that you'll be able to stay in the house. No protection for your interests. I didn't intend to, I replied. But Barkley insists it's the best option for inheritance planning. Phineas snorted. Inheritance planning? Maybe. But only not for the testator, but for the heirs. If you're worried about inheritance, I can help you draw up a proper will with conditions. But a gift is just a transfer of property with no conditions. After talking to Phineas, I felt more confident. At least now I knew for sure I wouldn't sign whatever Barkley was suggesting. Merritt called 2 days later. Papa, have you studied the documents? She asked after the usual inquiries about my well-being. Yes, I have, I replied. And I'm not signing them. There was a pause. Why not? There was a note of steel in her voice. It's for your own good. It's for my own good to leave it alone, I said calmly. This house is all I have left. I'm not going to give it up. Dad, nobody's asking you to give it up. You'll live there just like you did before. It's just that Barkley will technically own it. What if I want to sell the house, or mortgage it, or rent out some of the rooms? I won't be able to do that. She sighed with obvious irritation. Why would you do that? At your age and with your health, at my age and in my health, I'm still the master of my life and my property, I said, and I will not sign those papers. After this conversation, there was a lull. For a week, there was no word from Merritt. Then on Sunday, Thatcher arrived unexpectedly. He came alone, unannounced, and looked worried. "Grandfather," he said, as we settled on the veranda, "I need to talk to you." "Of course you do, son. What's wrong?" He hesitated, clearly not knowing where to begin. "It's about Mom and Barkley. They've been talking a lot about your house." I nodded. "I know. They've already come with the deeds to the property. It's not just that." Thatcher lowered his voice, though there was no one else in the house but us. "Yesterday I overheard them talking. They were discussing other options." "What other options?" He clearly felt uncomfortable giving his parents away. "Barkley said that if you don't agree voluntarily, they can try to prove your incapacity because of age and illness. Then the court could appoint Mom as your guardian, and she'd get the right to administer the estate." I felt a wave of anger rising inside me. "Do they think I'm an old man out of my mind?" Thatcher shook his head. "Of course not. But Barkley said it was possible to find a doctor who would give the right opinion, especially given your diagnosis and age." I leaned back in my chair, trying to comprehend what I'd heard. My own daughter was planning to declare me incompetent to get my house. "Thanks for the warning, Thatcher," I said finally. "You did the right thing." He looked guilty. "I didn't mean to betray them. But it's wrong, what they're doing." "You didn't betray them. You did the honorable thing." After Thatcher left, I called Phineas again and told him about the new turn of events. "Don't panic prematurely," he said, after a long pause. "You need a good reason to be declared incapacitated. Age alone is not enough, even with a diagnosis of emphysema. But just to be on the safe side, you should be evaluated by an independent psychiatrist. I know a good one, Doctor Higgins. He can give you an opinion of full competency that'll be hard to challenge." "Do you think it will come to that?" I asked. "On me? I hope not. But it's better to be safe," Phineas said. "I'll make arrangements with Higgins for next week." No sooner had I hung up than the doorbell rang. Barkley stood there, alone, without Merritt. "Ebner?" He smiled his trademark smile. "I was driving by and thought I'd drop in. May I come in?" I let him into the house, wondering what tactic he'd choose this time. "Merritt said you refused to sign the papers," he began, as we sat down in the living room. "I understand your hesitation. It's a big step." "Not doubts, Barkley. A decision. I will not sign the deed of gift." He nodded, as if he expected this answer. "Good. I respect your decision. But perhaps we could find a compromise?" "What kind of compromise?" Barkley took out a new folder of documents from his briefcase. "I've prepared another option. Not a deed of gift, but a life tenancy agreement. You transfer ownership of the house to us, and we agree to provide for you for the rest of your life. Food, medicine, care." I took the documents and took a quick look at them. "And what guarantees that you will fulfill your obligations?" "Everything is spelled out in the contract." Barkley pointed to the relevant clauses. "If we violate the terms, you can terminate the contract through the court and get your house back." "Through the court?" I grinned. "At my age and with my health, suing a professional lawyer? Sounds like a great plan." Barkley looked a little hurt. "Ebner, I understand your concerns. But believe me, Merritt and I mean well. We see how hard it is for you to manage your home, especially now with your diagnosis." "I manage my house just fine," I said. "I have a nurse, a neighbor helps with the cleaning, a grandson with the garden. Everything I need." 3 days later, while I was in the garden, Merritt arrived. This time, she had not only Barkley with her, but some man in a strict suit I didn't know. "Dad," she smiled a little too broadly, "I'd like you to meet Dr. Pratt." He's a geriatric specialist. We brought him here to take a look at you. I knew right away where this was going. This was the same doctor who was supposed to give me a ruling of incompetence. Why should I be examined by a doctor I don't know? I asked, without getting up from the bench. I have an attending physician, Dr. Pembroke. Dad, it's just a consultation. Merritt stepped closer. We're worried about you. Dr. Pratt is a very good specialist, and he can help us figure out the best way to manage your care. I don't need organized care, I said. I've got it all worked out. Dr. Pratt, a small balding man with a notebook in his hands, coughed. Mr. Dorset, your daughter is really worried about you. This is standard procedure for people your age with serious illnesses. A simple conversation, a few tests. No, I shook my head firmly. I won't be taking any tests. In fact, I expect you to leave. I have a vacation planned. Merritt gave Barkley a helpless look. He stepped forward. Ebner, you're being unreasonable. We want to help. If you want to help, then respect my wishes. I was beginning to lose my patience. Now, please leave. After they left, I called Phineas and asked him to expedite the meeting with Dr. Higgins. The next day, I was already sitting in his office, taking tests for cognitive function, memory, and decision-making ability. Minus Mr. Dorset, Higgins said when he finished. You are in excellent mental shape for a man of your age. I see no reason to doubt your capacity. He gave me an official report, which I immediately took to Phineas for notarization. Now I had a trump card up my sleeve in case Merritt and Barkley tried to go to court. That evening of the same day, I received a phone call from Thatcher. Grandfather, I just wanted to warn you. Mom and Barkley are very angry about yesterday. They didn't expect you to refuse to talk to Dr. Pratt. Thanks for the warning, Thatcher, I replied. But I've already prepared myself. Today I was examined by an independent psychiatrist who confirmed my full capacity. There was a chuckle in the phone. You've outplayed them, Grandpa. I hope it won't come to games, I sighed. We're family, after all. But I was wrong. The next day Merritt arrived alone, and the look on her face didn't bode well. Papa, she began without preamble, I can see that you refuse to accept our help, but you must understand that we will not back down. This is about your well-being. And my home, I added. She pressed her lips together. Yes, and my home, too. You're 83 years old, and you have advanced emphysema. You can't live alone in a big house. It's dangerous. According to whom? I asked. Dr. Pembroke doesn't see it as a problem. Fiona says I'm doing just fine. They don't live with you, Merritt countered. They don't see how hard it is for you. Do you? You're here once a week, and that's only since you found out I was sick. She ignored what I said. Dad, I'm saying this once. Either you agree to our terms, remortgaging the house in exchange for full provision and care, or— She paused. Or we have to go to court. It won't be hard to prove you're incapacitated. Age, illness, refusal to submit to a medical examination. I have Dr. Higgins's report of full capacity, I interrupted, watching her face change. Notarized, so your threats are unfounded. Merritt turned pale. Did you take the exam on purpose? Why? The same reason you brought Dr. Pratt here, I replied calmly. I'm protecting my interests. She stood up, clenching her fists. You insufferable old man. We're trying to help, and you're just out of your mind stubborn. Out of my mind? I got up too. According to Dr. Higgins, I'm perfectly fine. Your behavior, on the other hand, is questionable. You know what? She grabbed her bag. Do whatever you want. Live alone, fall down, get hurt. But when you get really sick, don't call us. She left, slamming the door. I sank into the chair, feeling strangely empty. My only daughter had just wished me to suffer alone, and all because of the house. Thatcher called in the evening. He had heard from his mother about our quarrel and was calling to make sure I was all right. I'll come tomorrow, Grandpa, he said. Don't listen to Mom. She's just upset. Upset that she didn't get my house. I grinned bitterly. You know, Thatcher, I never thought I'd live to see my own daughter consider me a burden and a nuisance. You are not a burden, he said firmly, and I will always be on your side, no matter what happens. After talking to my grandson, I sat at the window for a long time, looking at the garden that Gwendolyn and I started many years ago. What would she say when she saw what our daughter had become? How could we have raised a man for whom material possessions were more important than family ties? I knew the fight had only just begun. Merritt and Barkley would not give up so easily. But now I had a protector, my grandson Thatcher, who, unlike his mother, still remembered what family meant. After the fight with Merritt, there was a strange lull. She didn't call, she didn't visit. Not even Barkley showed up with his files full of documents. Only Thatcher visited me regularly, helping with the garden and small household chores. "Mama's still mad," he said one day as he trimmed the hedge. "But I think she'll cool down by your birthday." My birthday was coming up the 7th of July, when I would turn 83. Not that I attach much importance to it. At my age, birthdays are not a cause for joy, but rather a reminder of how much time is left. "I'd rather she didn't come at all," I replied, watching Thatcher's deft handling of the garden shears. "The last time she wished me to suffer alone." Thatcher lowered his eyes guiltily. "She didn't mean it, grandfather. She just had a temper." "You know, there are some things you can't say, even if you have a temper," I sighed. "Especially to your parents." He didn't argue. We both knew I was right. A week before my birthday, Merritt did call. Her voice sounded tense but not hostile. "Dad, we want to throw you a little birthday party," she said without preamble. "I made reservations at the River Garden for 7 o'clock tonight. Will that be all right with you?" The River Garden was an expensive restaurant in downtown Kalispell. Not the kind of place I'd go to willingly, but I decided not to argue. "It's fine," I answered. "Who's coming?" "Barkley and I, Thatcher, you." She paused. "You can invite someone else if you want." I thought of Fiona. She was the only person, besides Thatcher, with whom I socialized regularly. But bringing a nurse to a family dinner would be weird. "No, no one," I said. "Thank you for the invitation." "Good," she said, a flicker of relief in her voice. "So it's a deal. Thatcher will pick you up at 7:30. On my birthday, I woke up with a feeling of heaviness in my chest, not from emphysema, but from a premonition. Something told me it wasn't going to be a pleasant evening. Merritt wasn't the type to easily forget a grudge or change his plans. Thatcher arrived exactly at the appointed time, at 7:30. He was dressed in a strict suit and looked unusually formal. "Happy birthday, Grandpa." He hugged me and handed me a small box tied with a ribbon. "Open it now." Inside was a beautiful leather wallet with my initials on it. "Thank you, Thatcher." I was touched. "Very nice." "Your old one is all worn out," he smiled. "It's time for a new one." On the way to the restaurant, Thatcher was unusually silent. Several times he started to say something but stopped halfway through. "Something wrong?" I finally asked him. He sighed, not taking his eyes off the road. "Just Mom and Barkley. They're up to something again. I don't know what it is, but Barkley called some realtor yesterday." "A realtor?" I'm tense. "Why?" "I don't know." Thatcher shook his head. "But I don't like it." The River Garden greeted us with dim lights and soft music. Merritt and Barkley were already waiting at a table in the corner of the room. Both were dressed as if they were attending a business meeting, not a family dinner. "Dad," Merritt stood up and gave me a brief hug. "Happy birthday." "Ebner." Barkley held out his hand to shake. "Congratulations. You look great." We sat down at the table. The waiter brought a menu, but Merritt immediately said she'd already ordered for everyone. That wasn't her style. She usually spent a lot of time perusing the menu, picking out the most expensive dishes. "Now, Papa," she began, as the waiter left. Barkley and I have been thinking a long time about our disagreement, and we've come to the conclusion that we overreacted. I waited in silence, not believing her sudden remorse. We realized that a house is more than just a possession to you, she continued. It's a memory, a history. We should have been more delicate. Barkley nodded gravely. Indeed, Ebner, we approached the matter too bluntly. I apologize for that. I looked at Thatcher. He looked as surprised as I was. Thank you for understanding, I said gently. I hope we can drop the subject and just enjoy the evening. Merritt smiled, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. Of course, Dad. It's your day. The waiter brought appetizers and wine. The conversation turned to neutral topics: the weather, Thatcher's new landscaping project in the city park, the latest movies. I almost believed the evening could actually pass peacefully. But when the main course was served, Merritt suddenly put down her fork and looked at me. Dad, I want to get back to talking about the house. I sighed. Merritt, we've already discussed this. I won't. No, listen to me, she interrupted me. We have a new offer. We found you an apartment in an assisted living facility. It's a great place, 24-hour staff, medical care. I'm not moving to a nursing home, I said firmly. I'm fine where I live now. Barkley intervened. Ebner, this isn't a nursing home. It's a state-of-the-art facility for seniors who value comfort and security. You will live on your own, but under the care of specialists. What about my home? I asked, already knowing the answer. Merritt and Barkley looked at each other. We think it's better to sell it, Merritt said. It's too big. It needs constant maintenance. The money from the sale will go to pay for your living expenses in the new place. And if I keep it? I couldn't resist the question. Barkley coughed. Given the state of the real estate market, I doubt there will be much left. It's not cheap to stay in a good boarding house. I looked at them both and suddenly realized that they had already made up their minds. They had already found a buyer. They had already chosen a place for me in a nursing home. All that was left was to get my consent. No, I said firmly. I'm not selling the house and I'm not moving. Merritt pressed her lips together. Dad, be reasonable. You can't live alone like this. It's dangerous. I'm doing fine, I objected. I have help. A nurse twice a week and a neighbor to clean? Merritt snorted. It's not enough. What if you fall? Or have an attack in the night? Thatcher tried to intervene. Mom, maybe not now. It's Grandpa's birthday. Right now, she cut him off. Dad, I say this as your daughter, who loves you and worries. You need constant care. I looked at her and didn't recognize her. This was not the girl Gwendolyn and I raised. Or maybe it was that one, selfish, used to getting everything she wants. If you really care about me, I said quietly, then respect my wishes. I want to stay in my house. Merritt banged her palm on the table, attracting the attention of the neighboring tables. Give up the house for my husband. Her words sounded so loud that several customers turned in our direction. Barkley tried to calm her down by putting his hand on her shoulder, but she shook it off. Stop pretending, Merritt continued without lowering her voice. We all know you don't have long to live. Why cling to a house we're going to have when you're dead anyway? You're just an old man out of his mind who doesn't think about his loved ones. Thatcher jumped up. Mom, how can you say that? But Merritt didn't stop. You, she jabbed her finger in my direction, are just a wreck who's too stubborn to admit the obvious. You need help, constant care. But no, you cling to your house like it's the only thing you have. The restaurant became quiet. Everyone was watching our family scene. I could feel my cheeks burning with shame and humiliation. Calm down, Merritt, Barkley finally took her hand. This is not the place for such talk. Wow, where is? She turned to him. We've tried to talk to him amicably, suggested various options. He rejects everything. He thinks only of himself. I sat with my eyes down in my plate. A storm of emotions raged inside: anger, resentment, frustration. But I was silent. What could I say? That my daughter had turned into a greedy, heartless woman? That she was dishonoring her mother's memory with such behavior? Thatcher put his hand on my shoulder. "Grandpa, why don't we go home? I'll drive you." I nodded, unable to utter a word. "Yeah, take him," Merritt said, with a wave of her hand. "He's useless anyway. It's a waste of time." Thatcher and I stood up. Barkley tried to pretend everything was all right by holding out his hand to me. "Ebner, I'm sorry about the incident. Merritt is just worried about you." I ignored his hand. Thatcher and I walked out of the restaurant under the stares of all the customers. In the car, I was finally able to exhale. My hands were shaking. "I'm so sorry, Grandpa." Thatcher looked depressed. "I didn't realize she'd make such a scene." "It's not your fault," I said, looking out the window at the lights of the city passing by. "It's just the way she is. She wasn't always like this." Thatcher shook his head. "She used to be kinder." "Maybe," I wasn't sure. Or maybe she was just better at hiding her true nature. We drove the rest of the way in silence. Thatcher drove me home and offered to stay the night, but I declined. I needed to be alone, to think about what had happened and make a decision. After my grandson left, I sat in a chair for a long time, looking at the pictures on the wall: Gwendolyn, Merritt as a child, our family when we were happy, or thought we were happy. Merritt's words echoed in her head: "Out of his mind, old man, a wreck. You don't have long to live." How could she say that? How could she humiliate me publicly on my birthday? And the worst part was, she was sure she was right. Sure she had the right to control my life, my home, my future. I didn't sleep much that night. And in the morning, I made a decision. The first thing I did was call Phineas. He listened to my story about last night without comment, only occasionally sighing heavily. "What do you want to do, Ebner?" he asked me when I had finished. "Sell the house," I answered. "But not to them. And change the will." "Are you sure? It's a big step." "I'm absolutely sure. Merritt overstepped her bounds yesterday. I can't go on living knowing that she's just waiting for me to die so she can have the house." Phineas was silent for a moment, then said, "Okay. I know a good realtor, Sabrina Locke. She's honest and works fast. About the will, come over this afternoon, and I'll get everything ready." I called Sabrina right after I talked to Phineas. She arrived an hour later, an energetic middle-aged woman with a notebook and a camera. "Minus Mr. Dorset," she said, as she looked around the house. "This is a beautiful property, large lot, good location, solid construction. But, frankly, the house needs some repairs. If you want to sell quickly, you'll have to lower the price." "How much?" She quoted a price that was well below market value, but that didn't bother me. The main thing was to sell quickly and without Merritt's involvement. "I agree," I said. "When can I put it on the market?" "Today," Sabrina smiled. "I'll take pictures and prepare the ad. If the price is what we discussed, the buyers will find it quickly." And so it was. 3 days later, I had 2 offers from potential buyers. I chose a couple with 2 children. They reminded me of Gwendolyn and me when we first bought the house. At the same time, I was looking for a new place to live for myself, not in a nursing home as Merritt wanted, but in a small community by Flathead Lake. There I found a small 1-story house, just 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen, but with a view of the lake and a small plot for a garden. When all the paperwork was ready, I called Thatcher. He had to hear about my decision from me, not my mother. "Grandfather?" There was concern in his voice. "How are you? After the other night." "I'm selling the house, Thatcher," I said bluntly. "And I'm buying a new one by Flathead Lake." There was silence on the phone. "You're what?" He finally let it out. "But why?" After what your mother said, I can't stay here, I answered. Every time I enter this house, I'll remember what she said. Besides, she won't rest. She'll try to take the house again and again. But it's your house. You and Grandma have lived here all these years. A house is just walls, Thatcher. I'll take the memories with me. He was silent for a long time, then he asked, Does Mom know? Not yet. I wanted you to be the first to know. She'll be furious, Thatcher warned, especially if she finds out you didn't sell the house to her. I know that. But it's my decision. That same day, I went to Phineas to make changes to the will. Before, Merritt was the primary beneficiary, with a small share for Thatcher. Now I was changing everything. Are you sure? Phineas asked when I explained my decision. To completely exclude your daughter from the will is a serious step. After what she said, I'm sure, I replied. Whatever I have left after the sale of the house will go to Thatcher. He's the only one who really cares about me. Phineas nodded and prepared a new document. I signed it with a feeling of strange relief. The sale of the house had closed in record time, just 2 weeks. The new owners were ready to move in immediately, and I had already bought the lake house and could move in. Merritt found out about the whole thing when it was too late to make a change. Thatcher called me in a panic. Grandpa, Mom found out. She's furious. She says she's going to sue, that you're not in your right mind, that she should have bought the house. Let her sue, I said calmly. I have Dr. Higgins' report on her capacity and witnesses to her behavior in the restaurant. That same day, Merritt came to see me. I was just packing to move. How could you do that? She burst into the house without knocking. Sell the house behind my back? To who? Why not us? I looked at her calmly. After what you said in the restaurant, you still ask. I was upset. She splashed her hands. You know that's not what I meant. No, Merritt. I shook my head. That's exactly what you meant. You think I'm an old man out of his mind who's keeping you from getting your property? Well, I have a lot less property now. She turned pale. We'll sue. We'll challenge the deal. Prove that you're incapacitated. You can try, I shrugged, but keep in mind that I cut you out of the will too. That was a low blow. Merritt froze, unable to believe her ears. You, what? But, I'm your daughter, and I'm your father, I replied. But that didn't stop you from calling me a brain-dead wreck. She collapsed in her chair, covering her face with her hands. You can't do that. It's not fair. Is it fair to ask a dying father to give up his house? I asked. Is it fair to humiliate him publicly on his birthday? Merritt looked up at me, her eyes full of tears, genuine or pretend, I couldn't tell. Daddy, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. But you can't cut me out of your will. I'm your daughter, your blood. Kinship isn't defined by blood alone, Merritt. I turned away, so I couldn't see her face. It's by deeds. Your actions have shown that you care only for my property, not for me. She stood up, suddenly stopped crying. You'll regret this. We will contest both the sale and the change of will. Do what you want, I said. But know that the more you push, the less chance I have of changing my mind. After she left, I sat back in my chair, feeling a strange emptiness inside. It was the end of my relationship with my daughter, the end of living in the house where so many years had passed. But at the same time, it was also a beginning. The beginning of a new life where I would be free from manipulation and pressure. 3 days later, I moved into my new home by the lake, small but cozy, with a view of the water and mountains in the distance. Thatcher helped with the move, moving my most prized possessions, photographs, books, Gwendolyn's chair, her collection of porcelain figurines. Grandpa, he said as we set things up, I want you to know that no matter what happens between you and Mom, I'll always be there for you. I hugged him, feeling a lump in my throat. Thank you, son. You have no idea how much this means to me. That evening, after Thatcher left, I sat on the porch of the new house for a long time, watching the sunset over Flathead Lake. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I was still grieving the loss of my relationship with my daughter, but another part of me felt relieved and freedom. I had done what I had to do, protected myself from a toxic relationship, rid myself of a source of constant stress. And now, in my 83 years, I could finally live the life I wanted, not the life others wanted. The first few days in the new house were a hassle. Despite its modest size, only 60 square meters, the arrangement required a lot of effort. Thatcher came every day, helping to unpack, arrange the furniture, hang paintings and photographs. I insisted that the picture of Gwendolyn took center stage in the living room, above the small fireplace, which I have not yet dared to heat. "It's cozy here," Thatcher said when we were done with the basic arrangement of furniture. "Much smaller than the old house, but what a view!" He was right. From the living room's panoramic window, we had a spectacular view of Flathead Lake, huge, calm, with mountains on the horizon. The water changed color depending on the time of day and the weather, from deep blue to soft turquoise. "Did your mom find out where I live now?" I asked, pouring the tea. Thatcher frowned. "Yes. She tried to find out from me, but I didn't say. Then I guess she checked the papers for the sale of the house." "And what did she say?" "A lot of things." He looked away. "Mostly that you were out of your mind to trade a nice house for a shack by the water. A $250,000 shack. Yeah, it's a wreck. It wasn't cheap. The location by the lake drove up the price. But it was exactly what I needed. One story, compact, with a small lot I could still work and far away from Merritt." "Was she going to sue?" I asked, looking out the window at the lake. "She says she is. But Barkley doesn't seem enthusiastic. I've heard him explain to her that there's virtually no chance of winning the case." "A sensible man, your stepfather," I remarked, "at least in legal matters." The third day after the move, Fiona called me. Her voice sounded concerned. "Mr. Dorset, I came to your house for the usual procedure, but the neighbor said you'd sold the house and left. What happened?" I explained the situation, trying to omit the more unpleasant details of the Merritt scandal. "And where do you live now?" she asked. "Dr. Pembroke is worried you might miss your treatments." I gave her my new address, though I knew it would be much more difficult for Fiona to drive here almost an hour one way. "It's a bit far," she thought. "But it's okay. I'll figure something out. You can't miss your shots and your checkups. Maybe Dr. Pembroke could recommend someone local," I suggested. "I'll ask him myself," she said. "In the meantime, I'll keep coming. I just wish I could come as often as I used to." I was resigned to the idea of having to find a new nurse when Fiona arrived 2 days later with an unexpected offer. "Minus Mr. Dorset," she said, as she finished her injection. "I've been thinking about your situation. You have a lovely new home, but you're here alone with no help, and I have to travel from far away, which doesn't allow for regular care." I nodded, waiting for her to suggest a replacement. "So," Fiona continued, "I was thinking, you have 2 bedrooms, don't you? Maybe I could take the second one. I'd pay your rent and keep an eye on your condition at the same time. It would be convenient for both of us." The suggestion took me by surprise. "You want to move here?" I asked. "But what about your work? You must have other patients." Fiona nodded. "I do, but not many. Mostly in the Big Fork, which isn't that far from here. Besides," she faltered, "I had to find a new place to live. My landlord's selling the house and I'd have to move anyway." I wondered. On the one hand, Fiona's presence solved a lot of problems. Regular treatments, help around the house, and just looking after me in case my condition worsened. On the other hand, I was used to being alone, and I wasn't sure I was ready to share a house with anyone else. "We could try," I said at last. "Let's say for a month. If both of us are comfortable, we can continue." She brightened up. Thank you, Mr. Dorset. I promise I won't get in your way. And of course, I'm willing to help with the household beyond my medical duties. And so Fiona became my neighbor. She moved in 3 days later with 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of books, and an old ginger cat named Rupert, whom she warned at once that he must behave himself in a strange house. To my surprise, life together turned out to be surprisingly comfortable. Fiona was not intrusive, respected my need for privacy, but was always there when I needed help. She cooked breakfast for two, I cooked dinner, and we usually ate lunch separately, as she was often away with other patients. Rupert, contrary to Fiona's fears, was the perfect companion, unhurried, independent, but loving to snuggle up next to me as I read in the armchair by the fire. Gradually, I began to realize that the move had actually done me good. I could breathe easier, not only because of the clean lake air, but also because of the absence of the constant tension that Merritt created with her visits and demands. Thatcher, too, approved of the new order of things. "It's good to have Miss Campbell living with you," he said on another visit. "Now I'll worry less." "And how is your mother?" I asked. "Still planning to sue?" He sighed. "She filed a lawsuit to invalidate the sale, claims that you were incapacitated when it was made." "What are the odds?" "Barclay says it's minimal. You have an independent psychiatrist's report. All the documents are correct. There are no witnesses of pressure or deceit." I nodded. That's exactly what I'd hoped for when I was preparing to sell the house. "What about the will?" I asked. "Does she know I cut her out?" "She does." Thatcher looked embarrassed. "And it makes her even angrier than selling the house. She thinks you betrayed the family." Family? I grinned bitterly. "The family she's talking about is long gone. There's only her greed and ambition. We both knew it was true, but it was hard for Thatcher to admit it. This was his mother we were talking about, after all." About 2 weeks after I moved in, something happened that I expected and feared at the same time. One evening, as Fiona and I were having dinner on the terrace, enjoying the view of the sunset over the lake, a familiar silver Lexus pulled into the driveway. "That's my daughter and her husband," I said to Fiona, feeling my shoulders tense. "I'm afraid it's not going to be a pleasant visit." Fiona nodded understandingly. "Do you want me to leave?" "No, stay," I replied. "Perhaps your presence will keep them from going to extremes." Merritt got out of the car without even closing the door and headed toward the terrace with wide strides. She was followed more discreetly by Barclay, with the unchanged folder of documents. "Papa!" Merritt exclaimed when she saw me. "We found you at last. What's the meaning of all this? Sell the house for nothing and run away here?" I got up slowly. "Good evening, Merritt. Barclay. Meet Fiona Campbell, my nurse and neighbor." Fiona nodded at them, but neither Merritt nor Barclay returned the greeting. "The neighbor?" Merritt looked around the terrace. "You put a nurse in here? Really, Dad?" "Minus Miss Campbell rents the second bedroom from me," I replied calmly. "It's convenient for both of us." Barclay cleared his throat. "Ebner, we need to talk. In private." I shook my head. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Fiona. I have no secrets from her." Merritt crossed her arms over her chest. "Fine. Then here's the deal. We've filed a lawsuit in court. The sale of the house will be invalidated. You were incompetent when you made it, under duress, and unaware of the consequences of your actions." I grinned. "Really? Who's going to prove it? Dr. Pratt, whom I didn't even let on my doorstep?" Barclay stepped forward. "Ebner, listen to me. We don't want to take this to court. It would be long, unpleasant, and expensive for all parties. We propose a compromise." "What kind of compromise?" He pulled a document out of a folder. "We're willing to accept the sale of the house as valid. But in return, you reinstate the old will, with Merritt as the primary beneficiary." I looked at my daughter. She stood with her lips pressed tightly together, with the expression of someone who was sure she was right and ready to fight to the end. "No," I said. "I will not change the will." "Papa," Merritt spluttered, "you can't do this. I'm your daughter. I'm your flesh and blood." "What did you do?" I asked quietly. "Calling me a wreck out of her mind? Demanding the house for your husband? Trying to declare me incompetent?" She brushed it off. "I overreacted, you know. I was upset. But that's no reason to disinherit your own daughter." It's not about the inheritance, Merritt," I shook my head. "It's about your attitude. You don't see me as a father, but as an obstacle between you and your property." Barkley intervened again. "Ebner, let's talk rationally. You sold a house that was worth about $500,000 for $350. You bought this house for $250. The rest of the money is your inheritance. It's not much if you think about it. Is it worth destroying a family over?" "It wasn't the amount of the inheritance that ruined the family," I answered. "It was Merritt's behavior." Fiona, who had been silently watching the conversation, coughed delicately. "I'm sorry to intrude, but Mr. Dorset mustn't worry. It could trigger an attack of emphysema." Merritt gave her an angry look. "Who the hell are you? Where did you come from? And what do you want with my father?" "I'm a registered nurse," Fiona answered calmly. "I've been taking care of your father on Dr. Pembroke's orders for months now. All I want is for him to be healthy and calm." "Of course," Merritt grimaced. "And that's why you moved in with a lonely, sick old man in the lake house. Very comfortable." I felt a wave of anger rising inside. "That's enough, Merritt. Not only are you insulting me, but you're insulting the man who really cares about me." "Cares?" she laughed. "Daddy, don't you see? She's just using you. Free lodging by the lake, plus probably hoping to get into your new will. Fiona's up. I think I'll leave you two to it. Family matters are best handled in private." "No," I got up too. "Stay, Fiona. But Merritt and Barkley had better go. We have no further business to discuss." Merritt stared at me as if I'd said something unimaginable. "You're kicking me out, your daughter? But you're asking this adventuress?" "I'm asking someone who respects me and my decisions to stay," I replied. "And I'm asking those who try to manipulate me and threaten to sue me to leave." Barkley put his hand on his wife's shoulder. "Merritt, let's go. This is not a good time. We're all too emotional." But she shook off his hand. "No. I want to understand what's going on. Dad, are you out of your mind? Do you realize what you're doing?" "Completely," I replied. "And I have a medical report to prove it. Now please leave." Instead of obeying, Merritt took a step toward the house. "I want to see how you're settling in, and I want to talk to you alone, without that woman." I blocked her way. "No, Merritt. You're not coming into my house. Not today." "It's my house too," she screamed. "I'm your daughter. I have a right to be here." "You have no right to my property," I replied firmly. "Not to this house, not to my money. And if you don't leave now, I'll call the police." Barkley finally intervened more forcefully. "Merritt, let's go. This is pointless. We're only making things worse." She turned to him. "Are you against me too? First my father, now you?" "I'm not against you," he replied tiredly. "But we can't do anything now. We have to go through the court, as we planned." Merritt gave me one last furious look. "All right, we'll go away. But this isn't over, Dad. You're gonna regret doing this to your family." They left, slamming the car doors loudly. I sank into a chair, feeling my hands shaking. Fiona silently brought me a glass of water and a sedative pill. "I'm sorry you had to witness that scene," I said when I regained my composure. She shook her head. "Don't apologize. Unfortunately, I've seen it happen more than once. Relatives who care more about property than the welfare of the elderly." We sat in silence, looking out over the darkening lake. Finally, Fiona asked, "Do you really think they'll sue?" "I'm sure they will," I replied. "Merritt isn't one to back down easily, especially when it comes to money." "What are their chances?" I shrugged. "According to Barkley, minimal. I have a certificate of competency, all the paperwork is correct, and the deal was done through an official realtor. But Merritt will try, even if there's no chance." The next day, Thatcher called. It was clear from his voice that he already knew about his parents' visit. "Grandpa, I'm so sorry," he said. "Mom came home furious, screaming that you were out of your mind and you'd gotten involved with some con artist." "Fiona's not a con artist," I sighed. "She's just renting a room from me and helping me with my treatment." "I know," Thatcher answered quickly. "I don't believe Mom. She's not herself right now." "What does Barkley say?" I asked. "Is he still planning to sue?" I'm not sure," Thatcher said quietly. "This morning, I heard him tell my mom that there's almost no chance of winning the case, and they'll only waste money on lawyers." "A reasonable man," I repeated my assessment. "Grandpa," Thatcher's voice grew quieter, "I want you to know that no matter what the court decides, no matter what Mom says, I'm on your side. You have the right to live the life you want." His words touched me to the core. "Thank you, son. That means a lot to me." A week after Merritt's visit, Phineas called me. His voice sounded tired. "Ebner, your daughter was at my office. She demanded a copy of your will and threatened to sue me for assisting in the defrauding of an incapacitated person." "And what did you say to her?" "The same thing I tell everyone in cases like this," he chuckled. "That a will is a confidential document, and I have no right to disclose its contents to third parties without the testator's consent. And about the deception, that all the documents are executed according to the law, and I have a medical report on your full capacity. Has she calmed down?" "Not really," Phineas sighed. "She screamed that she would file a complaint with the notary's office, that she would take away my license. You know, Ebner, I've seen a lot of things in 40 years of practice, but your daughter is impressive." "I'm sorry I dragged you into this," I said. "Don't apologize. I offered you my services, knowing what I'd be up against. Besides," he grinned, "Merritt isn't the first angry heir to threaten me with a lawsuit, and I'm sure he won't be the last." After talking to Phineas, I felt strangely calm. Yes, Merritt wasn't going to give up. Yes, there might be litigation ahead, but I was sure I was right and that the law was on my side. 2 weeks later, the county sheriff arrived, an older man with a tired face and attentive eyes. He introduced himself as John Henderson and explained that he had received a complaint from my daughter about possible fraud and financial mismanagement on Fiona's part. "Mr. Dorset," he said as we sat down in the living room, "it's my duty to look into such allegations, especially when it comes to elderly people who may be vulnerable to fraud." I nodded. "I understand, Sheriff. Ask whatever you want." He asked a few questions about my relationship with Fiona, the financial arrangements, how she ended up in my house. I told him everything as it happened, without hiding the details. "Your daughter claims Ms. Campbell is manipulating you to gain access to your estate," the sheriff said after my explanation. "That you changed your will in her favor." I laughed. "Sheriff, I did change my will, but not in Fiona's favor. I left everything to my grandson, Thatcher. Fiona doesn't even know about it." Henderson nodded. "Does your daughter know about it?" "Yes, I told her myself. That's why she's angry. Not because of Fiona, but because I cut her out of the will after she tried to take the house from me." The sheriff listened to my story carefully, asked a few more questions, and finally said, "Minus Mr. Dorset, I see no crime here. You're sane, you're acting knowingly, and there's no evidence of fraud on Miss Campbell's part. I'll close this case." When he left, I was relieved, but I knew it wasn't over. Merritt would not give up so easily. And indeed, 3 days later, she came again, this time alone, without Barkley. I was just working in the garden when her car stopped in front of the house. "Papa," she came up to me, trying to speak calmly. "We need to talk. A serious talk." I straightened up, leaning on the garden trowel. "About what, Merritt?" "The fact that you complained about Fiona to the sheriff? Or that you threatened Phineas with a lawsuit?" She blushed a little. "I'm worried about you. That woman lives in your house, and who knows what's on her mind. And Phineas? He's helped you make decisions you never would have made in a normal state of mind." "In what normal state of mind?" I asked. "The one where I give you all my possessions without complaint?" "Papa?" She took a step toward me. "You don't understand. Barkley and I wanted only the best for you. The house was too big. It needed care. We offered you a comfortable home with constant supervision. And in return, we wanted my house," I finished for her. "And when I turned you down, you called me a senile wreck, remember?" She lowered her eyes. "I overreacted. I said something I didn't mean." "No, Merritt," I shook my head. "You said exactly what you think you said, and that's why I changed the will." She looked up and I saw tears in her eyes. "Daddy, please, I'm your daughter, your only daughter. Are you going to cut me out of your life because of one mistake?" "Not because of one mistake," I answered. "It's because of a series of actions that showed that you're only interested in my property, but not in me." It had been a year since I'd moved into the little house by Flathead Lake. It's amazing how fast time flies when you live at peace with yourself. I turned 84, and although my health was gradually declining, the emphysema was progressing rather than receding. I felt happier than I had in many years before. The morning began, as usual, with a cup of coffee on the terrace. July was warm but not hot. The lake stretched out in front of me, huge, calm, with a light haze over the water. The mountains on the horizon were still tinged with morning blue, but soon the sun would color them brighter. Fiona came out of the house carrying a tray on which 2 cups of coffee and a plate of toast were smoking. "Good morning, Ebner," she said, setting the tray on the table. "How did you sleep?" Over the course of the year, we'd moved on to first names, dropping the formalities. And how could it be otherwise, living under the same roof? Fiona had become not just a neighbor or a nurse, but a true friend, tactful, attentive, with a subtle sense of humor that I'd learned to appreciate. "Not bad," I replied, accepting the cup, although I had shortness of breath again in the morning. She frowned. "Maybe you should increase your bronchodilator dosage." "I'll talk to Dr. Pembroke." "There's no need to bother him," I objected. "It's no worse than usual." Fiona shook her head. "You always say that. And then it turns out to be worse." We drank our coffee in comfortable silence, watching the sun rise over the lake. Rupert, Fiona's cat, sat in a nearby chair, squinting into the sun. He had become even slower and more philosophical over the year. Age was taking its toll on him, too. "Is Thatcher coming today?" Fiona asked, picking up the empty cups. "Yes, he promised to be here for lunch," I said. "He wants to show me the design for the new garden for the city library." Fiona smiled. "He's so much like you, just as enthusiastic and thorough." I nodded, feeling a surge of pride. Thatcher did resemble me in many ways, in his approach to work, in the way he spoke, even in some of his gestures. Although outwardly, he was more like Gwendolyn. The same soft features, the same expressive eyes. After breakfast, Fiona left to see other patients. She had only 3 of them left, including me, but she didn't want to leave them. I was left alone and decided to do a little work in the garden before my grandson arrived. The garden was small, just a few beds of vegetables, a small bed of flowers, and a few bushes along the fence. But it was entirely mine, planned and created without regard for other people's opinions. Thatcher helped with the hard work, but I took the main care of the plants. I was just finishing weeding a bed of carrots when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. He jumped out of his old pickup truck with bags in his hands. "Grandpa," he exclaimed when he saw me in the garden, "what are you doing? You're not supposed to bend over." I straightened up, leaning on the cane I now always took with me to the garden. "It's just weeding, Thatcher. I'm not digging a trench." He shook his head, but smiled. "Stubborn as ever. Let's go inside. I've brought groceries and I want to show you the project." In the living room, Thatcher spread large sheets of drawings and sketches on the table. The new garden for the library was an ambitious project, with outdoor reading areas, a playground based on famous fairy tales, and even a small pond. "This will be my first really big project," Thatcher said proudly. "If it works out, I'll get noticed." "I'm sure it will," I scrutinized the blueprints. "You have a great sense of space, and you have a good sense of how people will use this place." We were discussing the project when Thatcher suddenly changed the subject. "Grandpa, I saw Mom yesterday." I tensed up. Merritt hadn't tried to contact me in months. After she'd lost a lawsuit, she'd started trying to challenge the sale of the house and my new will. "And how is she doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Thatcher sighed. "Still angry. Says you betrayed her, that Fiona is manipulating you. Same arguments." "And Barkley?" "He seems resigned." Thatcher shrugged. After the court dismissed their suit, he realized it was pointless to fight. "But Mom? She can't let go." I nodded. It was in Merritt's nature not to admit defeat, not to back down, even when the fight became pointless. "You know," Thatcher continued, "she's found a new purpose. Now she is obsessed with the idea of buying a house in the same village where you live. She says she's going to make sure Fiona doesn't cheat on you." I couldn't help but chuckle. "Well, if she's got the extra money." "Houses aren't cheap, though. Barkley's trying to talk her out of it." Thatcher shook his head. "But you know Mom. When she's made up her mind about something—" "Yes, I knew it. Merritt was always stubborn, ever since she was a little girl. Gwendolyn said she'd inherited it from me, but I wasn't so sure. My stubbornness always seemed more rational." "Don't worry about it," I told Thatcher. "Even if she bought the house next door, it wouldn't change anything. I'm not going to renew a relationship that has only brought pain." Thatcher looked sad. "I understand you, Grandpa. It's hard. Being between you two." I put my hand on his shoulder. "I know, son. And I appreciate that you don't pick sides. You can love us both, even if we can't find common ground." After lunch, which we cooked together, Thatcher helped me with the garden, trimming the hedge, transplanting some bushes, fixing the creaking wicket. We worked side by side, and I felt the quiet joy of this joint activity. Here it is, the real connection of generations, not in property or inheritance, but in common moments, in the transfer of knowledge and experience. When Thatcher left, I pulled out my laptop. A year ago, after moving, I started writing my memoirs, not for publication, but for myself, and perhaps for Thatcher. The story of my work as a hydraulic engineer, the projects I was involved in, the people I worked with. Sometimes I included personal memories of meeting Gwendolyn, of Merritt's birth, of the happy years when we were a real family. It was getting harder and harder to write. My fingers wouldn't listen, and the letters on the screen sometimes blurred before my eyes. But I kept going, slowly but persistently. This was my life, and I wanted to keep it on paper while my memory was still good. In the evening, Fiona returned. She looked tired but satisfied. "How was your day?" I asked as she sat down in the chair across from me with a cup of tea. "Good," she smiled. "Mrs. Hendricks finally agreed to the knee operation. Mr. Patterson has almost fully recovered from his stroke. Today he walked down the stairs on his own unassisted. I listened to her stories about the other patients, happy for their progress. Fiona loved her work, treating her charges with genuine care. I was lucky that she had agreed to live here in my home, not just come twice a week as she used to." "How was your day?" she asked when she had finished her story. Thatcher came? Yes, he showed me the project for the library, I answered. Very talented work, and, uh, he told me that Merritt wants to buy a house nearby, to keep an eye on us. Fiona raised her eyebrows. Really? After everything that's happened? She's not the type to give up easily, I sighed. Though, what she's hoping to accomplish, I don't know. She's your daughter, Fiona said softly. Maybe somewhere deep down inside she just wants to repair the relationship. I shook my head. If she wanted to repair the relationship, she would have apologized, admitted she was wrong. But she keeps insisting that I'm the one who betrayed the family, that I'm the one who did wrong by selling the house and changing the will. Fiona didn't argue. She knew the whole story and understood why I'd made that decision. How's your shortness of breath today? She asked, changing the subject. It was worse than usual this morning. Tolerable, I replied. I had to use my inhaler after working in the garden, though. She frowned. Ebner, you should be more careful. Emphysema is no joke. I know, I smiled at her. But I can't just sit in a chair all day. I need movement. I need to feel like I'm still capable of something. Fiona nodded understandingly. She'd gotten to know my character over the year we'd been together, and she knew that prohibitions would only encourage my stubbornness. The next day, Fiona and I went fishing. It became our regular activity. Twice a week, weather permitting, we took our rods and the small boat I had bought the previous summer and went out on the lake. I had never been into fishing before. When I was young, I didn't have the time, then somehow it didn't work out. But here, by the lake, this activity came into my life naturally, as if I had always wanted it. We were sitting in a boat in the middle of the lake, casting our fishing rods. All around us was water, sky, and mountains on the horizon. Silence, broken only by the splashing of the waves against the side of the boat and the occasional cries of seagulls. You know, I said, looking at the float, when I was young, I never thought I would live like this in my old age. A little house by the lake, fishing, a garden. I envisioned something more. Grandiose. Fiona smiled. What was it? I don't know, I shrugged. Traveling the world, maybe. Or a big house full of guests. Something more significant. And isn't this more significant? She put her hand around the space around us. The lake, the mountains, the sky, peace and quiet. I think that's the most significant thing in life. I thought about what she said. Maybe she's right. What could be more meaningful than finding inner peace at the end of life? Than to live in harmony with yourself and nature, doing what brings you joy, not what others expect of you. We returned from fishing with a small catch, 2 trout that Fiona cooked for dinner. A simple meal, but for some reason unusually tasty. Maybe because of the fresh air, or because of the feeling of satisfaction of having harvested those fish myself. In the evening, when Fiona had already gone to her room, I sat on the terrace for a long time, looking at the lake, silvery in the moonlight. My thoughts inevitably returned to Merritt, to our breakup, to the fact that she was still angry and unable to let go. Strangely, I felt almost no bitterness. The pain of my daughter's betrayal had dulled, giving way to quiet sadness and acceptance. Yes, it happens. Sometimes relationships are irretrievably broken, and no amount of effort can repair them, especially when one party doesn't see their fault and doesn't want to change. I remembered how in my youth I tried to save one water supply project that was doomed from the very beginning because of a wrongly laid foundation, how much effort, time, and money we spent trying to strengthen the structure, fix the cracks, and prevent the inevitable. And then we had to tear it down and build again anyway. Sometimes it's easier to start from scratch than to endlessly patch up what was originally built wrong. Maybe our relationship with Merritt was like that, built on the wrong foundation. Maybe Gwendolyn and I made mistakes in her upbringing, or maybe she was just born with certain character traits that only intensified over time. In any case, now it's too late to change anything. The fall that year was especially beautiful. The forests around the lake were painted in bright colors: red, orange, gold. I often went out on the terrace just to sit and admire this splendor. Thatcher came regularly, every week. Even though his project for the library was in full swing, he helped prepare the house for winter, insulate the windows, clean the gutters, check the heating. "You know, Grandpa," he said one day, as we sat by the fireplace after a day of work, "I'm beginning to understand why you chose this place. It's so peaceful." I nodded. "Exactly. Tranquil. That's what you need at my age. No excitement, no drama, just peace." "Mom will never understand that," Thatcher sighed. "She still thinks you should have stayed in the big house where she could control you." "Your mother always liked to control," I pointed out. "Even as a child, she bossed all the kids in the yard. Gwendolyn said she would grow up to be a general." Thatcher smiled. "Well, tax consultant she became, not bad. But yes, control is about her." We were silent for a moment, staring at the fire in the fireplace. "She didn't buy a house nearby," Thatcher said suddenly. "Barclay convinced her that it was a pointless expenditure. Instead, they went on a cruise. Mom said she needed the distraction." "Good for them," I said sincerely. "I hope the trip helps her let go of this situation and move on." "I hope so too." Thatcher stood up, getting ready to leave. Although, knowing my mom, he didn't finish the sentence, but we both knew what he meant. Merritt wasn't the type to let go of grudges or change his point of view easily. As winter progressed, my health deteriorated. The cold air exacerbated the symptoms of emphysema, and it became harder to breathe. Fiona insisted on seeing Dr. Pembroke, who came himself when he heard about my condition. "Ebner," he said after the examination, "you must be very careful. The emphysema is progressing faster than we expected. You need to avoid all physical exertion, cold air, stress." I nodded, knowing that I would only partially comply with his recommendations. "Yes, I'll be careful, but I won't give up the things that make my life meaningful. Working in the garden when it gets warmer, fishing on the lake, walking along the shore." Fiona, who was present, seemed to read my mind. "Doctor, Ebner is not the kind of man who will just sit at home. Isn't there some kind of compromise? So he can do the things he loves, but with minimal risk?" Dr. Pembroke smiled. "I've known Ebner long enough to understand that." "Good. Let's discuss how to make his activity safer." I was grateful for Fiona's understanding. She wasn't trying to limit me like Merritt, but was looking for ways to help me live life to the fullest despite my illness. Winter was slowly giving way to spring. The snow was melting and the first buds were appearing on the trees. I went out on the terrace more and more often, breathing in the fresh air, observing the changes in nature. One morning, as Fiona and I were having breakfast, the phone rang. It was Thatcher, and I knew from his voice that something serious had happened. "Grandfather," he said, "Mother and Barclay have had an accident. They were coming back from Missoula, and on a slippery road their car skidded." I felt my heart squeeze. Are they all right?" "Barclay got away with bruises and a concussion," Thatcher answered. "And Mom? She has a broken leg and ribs. She's in the hospital." "I'll be there," I said without thinking. "Grandpa, you can't worry," Thatcher reminded me. "I just wanted you to know. She's in no danger. She just needs time to recover." "I'm coming anyway," I insisted. "She's my daughter, Thatcher. No matter what." Fiona drove me to the hospital in Kalispell. I was nervous the whole way, not knowing how Merritt would react to my visit, whether she'd chase me away, whether she'd take my appearance as an intrusion or, worse, as a sign of weakness on my part. Thatcher was waiting for us at the hospital entrance. "She's in a private room," he said as he led us down the corridor. Barclay had just gone to rest. He'd been here all night. At the door of the room I stopped, suddenly feeling uncertain. Maybe I should ask her first if she wants to see me, I suggested. Thatcher shook his head. I already told her you were coming. She didn't mind. I took a deep breath and entered the room. Merritt was lying on the bed, pale, with bruises on her face and a plastered leg. She looked small and vulnerable, not at all like the confident, commanding woman I was used to seeing her as. "Daddy," she smiled weakly when she saw me, "you've arrived." I came to the bed. "Of course I did. How are you feeling?" I've been better," she tried to joke. "The doctors say I was lucky. It could have been a lot worse." We talked about her condition, her treatment, how the accident happened. I tried not to touch on our past conflicts, and she seemed to do the same. When Thatcher came out to talk to the doctor, Merritt suddenly said, "You know, when the car started spinning down the road, I thought I was going to die. And you know what I regretted the most? That you and I never made up." I took her hand. "Merritt, no, let me finish." She looked me in the eye. "I'm not saying I was wrong about everything. I really thought I was doing what was best for you, offering to move, selling the house. But I shouldn't have said those things. Calling you like that. It was cruel and unfair. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from her." I'm sorry about a lot of things too," I said. "About the way things turned out. About the fact that we'd lost a year without communicating." We sat in silence, holding hands. Not reconciliation, no. Too much water had passed. The wounds were too deep. But perhaps the beginning of some new understanding. When I got home, Fiona asked me how the meeting had gone. "Strange," I replied. "Not good or bad, just different." She nodded understandingly. "Sometimes it takes something big to see things in a new light." "Yes," I agreed. "But that doesn't mean everything will change. Merritt is still Merritt, and I'm me." "And that's okay," Fiona said. "Not every relationship can or should be saved. Sometimes the best solution is to accept the situation as it is and find peace with yourself." I thought about her words for a long time that night. Yeah, that's right. I found peace with myself in that little house by the lake. In losing my daughter, I found myself, my true desires, my independence, my freedom from toxic relationships and manipulation. Perhaps Merritt and I will never be as close as we once were. Maybe our relationship will always be complicated, with reservations and reticence. But I've learned to live with it, not to let bitterness poison the good things I have left. My friendship with Fiona, the love of Thatcher, my little lake house, my fishing trips, and my garden. In the end, at 84, I finally realized what many people realize much earlier. Some relationships can't be fixed, no matter how hard you try. And that's not a tragedy, it's just part of life. The key is to find peace in what you have, not to grieve over what you've lost.